Hello and welcome back to episode 300 of 90% Knitting. This is part B, in which I will be doing the 300th episode Q&A and the drawings that were related to the 300th episode drawing thread in the Fibernymph Dye Works group. I've already recorded part A, which is the podcast's usual content, and I decided to divide it up since it would be way too long if I tried to put all of the usual content and all of the questions from the drawing thread into one podcast. So you can watch them all together, or you can split it up, whatever works best for you. I will be announcing the 3 drawing winners at the end of this podcast episode, though, the end of part B. So I'm going to make you wait. Although I figure you've been with me through 300 episodes, you're probably willing to stick around for one more to find out if you want a prize. So let me start out by saying thank you so much, not only for submitting an entry into the drawing thread, but thank you for being with me for 300 episodes if you've been here since the very beginning, or even if you've only been watching for an episode or two. I really appreciate everybody who watches the podcast. I do this because it's fun. I enjoy interacting with you guys. I love hearing from you, and it's just become a part of my life. It's been almost 8 years since I've been doing this. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of the first half of the podcast that I've officially been doing this, I believe, 95 months, because I started at the end of January in 2011. So 95 months, 300 episodes, that's 3.16 episodes per month. And still going. I would say still going strong, but sometimes I'm not quite as energetic as I probably was 8 years ago. But that's okay. I'm still here. I'm still doing it. And you guys, I appreciate you being with me along for the ride. So just to tell you again, I am going to go through and answer all of the questions that you guys asked in your entry, your drawing entry posts, because my prompt was for you to enter by leaving a message saying something you like about the podcast, something that you remember, which episode you really liked, or asking me a question. And I loved reading all of your responses. Some of you had memories of things from the podcast that I hadn't thought about in a while, so that was a lot of fun. Some of the things that you found notable were things that at the time maybe I just kind of mentioned offhand, and that always amazes me I guess amazes me isn't the word. I'm not sure what the right word is. Kind of humbles me in a way, because it's like you don't realize quite what your words mean until you hear how they've affected someone else. And hopefully that's been in a good way. So that was really cool. But I also enjoyed reading all of your questions, and there were so many. I've kind of organized them into a document on my laptop in order of categories of types of questions. Some of these questions were asked by a whole lot of you, so I'm not going to specify who asked them just because they were asked by quite a few people. But otherwise, I will try to mention who asked the questions, and I will do my best to answer them. But before I get to the actual questions, let me remind you of what the prizes are for the drawings. So there's 3 drawing prizes that I'm offering. The first one is this medium-sized project bag by Bags by Awesome Granny in the cute folk cottage fabric. And going along with that is a set of 6 20-gram mini skeins that coordinate with the bag. So, that's fun. I like dyeing up coordinating yarn for bag projects. Then, along with that, you will also be receiving some other little goodies that I popped in here. I have the set of 3 buttons, these 3 flower buttons, that are also matches for the fabric and the yarn. So maybe you'll come up with a project that you could use those on. And you will also be getting a little tin of the removable, like the light bulb stitch markers. I'm going to be starting to have these in the shop soon. I'm putting these together. So they're a little tin with 10 stitch markers, but you'll be getting one with your prize. And you'll be getting this really cute progress keeper. I had some of these left over from the Happy Hour Yarn Club. Maureen from Victorian Studio was making the progress keepers that went along with all of those yarn shipments, and I had some extras from the last one, which is these little gummy bears. They're gummy bear progress keepers. And doesn't that look like an actual gummy bear? That's amazing to me. Anyway, so you will be getting a gummy bear progress keeper. And lastly, you'll be getting a coupon code for Ravelry for a Heidi Nick pattern. So you can use that pattern code to download any one of Heidi Nick's patterns. She had donated a whole bunch of pattern codes to her shop a while back after she used my yarn to design one of her sock patterns. So anyway, you can choose one of her patterns. So that is the first prize pack. The second prize pack is also a Bags by Awesome Granny bag, but this one is a Notions pouch. So it's super cute and little. And I dyed up those same 6 colors on 10-gram micro skeins. So you're still getting the yarn, just in smaller skeins. And then all of the rest of the prize pieces are the same. The stitch markers, the progress keeper, the buttons, and the pattern code. So you'll be getting that. And then the last prize is a $25 gift certificate to my shop, Fibernymph Dye Works. That one's easy to tell you about. So at the end of the podcast, I will announce who the 3 winners are. But now let's get started because I've got lots of questions to answer. The first category of questions is basic podcast questions that I received, or questions about the podcast. And the first one was Renegale, who asked, how did you come up with your moniker Fibernymph? Well, that was sort of not well thought out, actually. At that time, when Ravelry was first starting and I was trying to become a member of Ravelry and you had to pick your username, that was at a point where I wasn't dying then, so it didn't have anything to do with the shop. But I was homeschooling my 2 teenagers at that point in time, and I was also doing a lot of reading about, like sort of fantasy reading and stories with nymphs and sprites and elves and wizards and all that kind of stuff. We were very into like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Narnia and things like that, and a lot of other ones too. Those are the 2 that are top of my brain. And so for whatever reason, nymphs were on my mind, and I just sort of pulled Fibernymph out of the blue related to that. So that was really it. No major thing. And then when it came time for me to choose a name for my business, I thought about a lot of different things, but then it just seemed like Fibernymph was how people knew me. So Fibernymph Dye Works became the name of my business. Sometimes there's not really big, huge, deep stories to things. Unfortunately, I wish there was, but that's how it worked. All right, so VShaw7 asks, congratulations, thank you. I'd love to hear about why you decided to start the podcast in the first place, what you enjoy or don't enjoy about doing it, and how podcasting has changed for you in all of those episodes. Well, I started doing the podcast, again, it was before I was dyeing. I was preparing to start my dyeing business at the same time, but I hadn't started it yet. It hadn't launched. But at that point in time, again, I was a homeschooling mom. I was home a lot, and I didn't have really much of a knitting community around me. And I was also a fairly new knitter at that point in time. And so I enjoyed the knitting podcasts that I knew of that were out there at that time. But that was why I started. I just wanted to have that community connection. And it's been fun. Let me see. What do I enjoy or not enjoy doing about it? Well, I enjoy talking to you guys. I enjoy sharing what I'm working on. I love knowing that I'm talking to people who get me. My people, as my husband refers to you guys. that's the fun part. Just the interaction and hearing what you have to say in response, and the whole community building. That's always been the part of it that's been my favorite part. What I don't enjoy so much is the technical aspect, and it's the boring part to talk about, but there's always technical struggles, whether it's trying to figure out good lighting or a good situation set up to, you know, a situation for setting up, or doing the processing and editing and things like that, because the technology for that has changed over the years, and it's something that takes time to learn, and I don't always have that time, so it feels like a struggle a lot of the times. But in general, I enjoy most aspects, because if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't still be doing it. How has podcasting changed for me in all these episodes? Well, number one, there are a whole lot more podcasts out there in this community. So I guess that's not so much for me podcasting, but just the fact that there are a lot more podcasts out there, which I think is really neat. And, you know, again, that community just keeps getting bigger and bigger. The technology end of it has definitely changed. For me personally, what has changed is I've learned that I need to try to focus my attention on certain things and not other things, because honestly, every week I could probably sit here and talk to you for hours, because there's so many things that I would love to be able to share with you. And it's so easy for me to go off onto tangents, and, you know, I have to curtail how much of that I do, or else you'd never get to see a podcast that was less than like 5 hours long. And the other thing is, you know, I've never been one who has held back on talking about personal things on my podcast, but there's always a limit to how much you can put yourself out there. And I know it sort of ebbs and flows for me. Sometimes I feel like, okay, I need to like draw in a little bit and maybe not share quite as much, but it's really important to me to feel like I'm being genuine with you guys and not just sugarcoating things and like, oh, life is awesome and here it is. You know, it's like, because life isn't always awesome, and I will tell you about that, but I also don't want to sound like I'm just complaining all the time, because nobody wants to watch that. So I hope that answers your questions. Rocknit asks, 300 episodes is quite an achievement. It seems to me this is an opportunity to reflect back, and I'm interested in knowing what your goals were when you started. Did the podcast help you achieve them, and how? Okay, that's kind of related to the last question. My main goal was to, again, be part of that new online knitting community that was really growing, like with the advent of Ravelry and the advent of a lot of podcasts that were starting up. You know, I liked being a part of that. I think also for me was the fact that I was planning to start my own dyeing business, and I knew that. It was not the primary reason I started my podcast, but I knew it would be an instrumental part of my business, having the ability to talk to people directly through a podcast about my dye business. And in that respect, I think all of my goals have been achieved or are continuing to be achieved in that way. I continue to have this outlet to talk to other knitters and interact with you guys through the group and through the YouTube videos. You know, getting comments directly on the YouTube videos is something that's taken me a while to get up to speed with answering, but I'm finally getting better at that. In prior iterations of how the podcast was published, that wasn't really an option. So it's nice to be able to do that way. Whereas the Ravelry group interaction, other than for knit-alongs and things, isn't quite as instrumental as it was earlier on. But I do still try to keep up with conversations that way too. So again, achieving that sense of community has been something that's been ongoing. I think it's been something that has been achieved, you know, at higher levels sometimes than others, but it's still definitely been a success. And as far as being a way for me to share with you about my business, I think that also has been very instrumental and very well achieved, because it's, you know, it's a choice. You guys can always turn it off if you aren't interested in that, but it gives me a chance to just talk to you about it. So yes, I would say it has helped me achieve them. Thank you for those questions. We're going to move on now to knitting questions, and let's go with the first one is from WMH302, who asks, I'm curious about what your most and least favorite knit is and why. Well, my most favorite knit, I think if you've been watching the podcast, probably you could guess. I love knitting socks. Socks have been a mainstay for me pretty much since I started knitting. I do enjoy knitting shawls. I enjoy knitting hats. I'm probably very much more an accessory knitter than I am a garment knitter. I would love for that to be different, but it's just my knitting personality. I like smaller projects more so than those real big ones sometimes. My least favorite knits, I would say, are fiddly things. I love the idea of knitted stuffed animals, but most of them are so fiddly that I get turned off by them. And also, least favorite would probably be circular shawls. I've never succeeded in knitting a circular shawl. Matter of fact, I brought one to show you. This is the Hemlock Ring by Jared Flood. And if you look at it real close, like, it's more of the hemlock amoeba because it is not at all circular shaped. I don't know that the full effect is coming across this way. Oh yeah, this should be a nice bump. It's not. This is more of an amoeba. I have never ever succeeded in completing a circular shawl. I cast on for the Even Star one time out of lace weight, and I totally failed, like really soon in, because I just couldn't do it. I don't know what it is, so that's kind of my least favorite, but that's also kind of in the fiddly category. I find round shawls to be sort of fiddly like that. I don't know why. Okay, Skyly Knits asks, what would you consider your knitting magnum opus? Magnum opus. Now, I had to Google magnum opus to make sure that I had the correct definition of it in my mind. And it is a large and important work of art, especially one regarded as the most important work of an artist or writer. Okay, so that was pretty much what I thought it meant. I would say if you're talking about what I have completed already, I'm really not sure. I think what I would say is my wedding skirt. That was, it's not the one that's taken me the longest. It was not the most complicated, but it was something that was very, very important to me. I designed it all sort of on the fly, and I got it done in time for my wedding, and I loved having it. So I would say that was probably my magnum opus to this point of anything that I've knit. Googly Knit asks, I love that you don't follow current trends and knit the same thing as every other podcaster. Is this on purpose, or do you just march to your own beat on most things? Well, yeah, you could ask pretty much anybody who knows me in real life, and they would say, yes, Lisa marches to the beat of her own drummer. I pretty much always have. And I would say that's probably a good part of that answer. As far as like the really popular patterns, I mean, there's a lot of them. I queue them all the time. I put them in my Ravelry queue because I really like them a lot of the time. But again, if a lot of them are garments, I'm not a big garment knitter, so I'm not going to be knitting like 12 sweaters a year. That's just not who I am. And I'm bad at following patterns. I do knit things from patterns, obviously, but more often than not anymore, I love sitting down and I have an idea in my brain that I want to see, come out in the yarn. So even if I start with a pattern, I might end up changing it up, or I might just try to, develop my own idea into an actual knitted garment. But I guess I'm not necessarily trend driven. A lot of my knitting for me is driven from the yarn. I have yarn specifically that I want to knit with, so I look for projects that would be applicable to that yarn rather than seeing a project or a pattern on Ravelry and saying, oh, I really like that, I want to knit that, and then going and looking for the yarn. So I think that might be more why I don't tend to knit along with all of the trends all of the time. L. Cole, Koehle 42, sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. She asks, do you have a favorite all-time pattern? I do, and it's super boring. It is a plain vanilla sock pattern. I love knitting plain stockinette socks with a slip stitch heel and gusset. That is my favorite thing to knit because I don't need a pattern. I know how to do it off by heart. I love that heel. It fits me super well. And usually when I'm knitting a plain stockinette sock, I'm doing it out of self-striping yarn, and that's what keeps it interesting. I won't say I never knit socks out of semi-solids or variegateds, and I won't say I never knit, a patterned sock, but ordinarily it's just a plain vanilla sock, and they're super portable. I take them around with me all over the place, so that is definitely my all-time favorite pattern. Tanya Twister asks, who would be your top 10 dyers that you would love to have in your stash, current or past? Oh my goodness. This is a horribly, terribly hard question. I was thinking about this for so long, and I had a really hard time making a list because there are so many. And again, at this point, it's not so much because I want a specific dyer in my stash, it's more the yarn itself that appeals to me. There are a lot of the really woolly wools, like things that the woolly thistle carries, that I really enjoy getting a hold of to try. Right now I'm more in the collecting phase than the trying phase, but yeah, there's just a lot of those farm wools, like that you wouldn't necessarily know the name of, that I see like at shows. I love getting those. I will say there's a couple of dyers like from the UK, Nora George, and there's another one, I can't remember the name. Just ones that aren't super accessible here in the US. I would love to try those. Stranded was one, but I did just get some of her yarn. Yeah, I mean, there's US based dyers as well. Who do I not have in my stash right now? I mean, there's a lot that I don't have. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. This was so hard because there's so many. And right now I'm watching all these Vlogmas episodes and people are opening, their yarn advent calendars. Cat Sandwich Yarns, she's got some amazing colorways, or they have, because I think it's a couple. Matter of fact, they vended at a show that I was just vending at not long ago, and I didn't get any of their yarns, and I could kick myself. I would love to get some Cat Sandwich fibers. Sweet Sparrow Knits, she's another one. I just got my first yarn from her within the last month or so. Knox Yarn Co., they've got some neat yarns out. Yeah, there's too many to mention because there's also dyers that I have in my stash, but I would always welcome more yarn. Like Leadingman Fiber Arts, I have half of a cubby, I think, that has Leadingman Fiber Arts yarn in it. Woolen Vines, another one. Her colors are fabulous. And the thing is, they're so different than my colors. Plus, most of them don't do self-striping, and I don't do, I mean, I do I do variegateds, but they do them in such a different way than I do. That's what makes it a lot of fun. And I'm really finding myself attracted to very subtle colors these days, and those aren't what I tend to dye, but I love getting them from other dyers who do them really well. All right, O for More Time asks, what percentage of your knitting uses your own yarn versus that of other dyers? And also she said she would be interested in a basic Meet the Dyer 20 Facts About Me kind of recap. I will put something like that at the very end, because once we get through all these questions, there'll probably be far less facts you don't already know about me. So let me get through all these. I'll do a 20 facts about me at the very end. They might be silly facts at that point, but we'll see. But as far as the percentage of my yarn versus other people's yarn, looking at my stash, it should be way higher. The percentage should be way higher that I'm knitting with other people's yarn than I am. But I would say in the last couple of years, I've definitely started knitting with my yarn more frequently than others. I would say at this point, it's probably at least 50-50. Although, well, yeah, because if you take my sweater projects into consideration, I have not knit any sweaters out of my own yarn. Yeah, I would say, at least for my accessory knitting and shawl knitting and things like that, a lot of it's out of my own yarn. So at least 50%, if not maybe a little bit more at this point. I struggle with that though because I have such a huge stash of yarns that I absolutely love from other dyers and other companies, and I need to use more of it. But I also am always thinking from a business standpoint, like if I knit out of my yarn, I can use it as a show sample. So that's sort of a little bit of a struggle there, but I do hope to be able to knit up more things from other yarn that I already have in the near future. From Kiersey asks, was there ever a project that you gifted to someone and wished you hadn't, either because you felt they didn't appreciate it or because you loved it so much you had wanted to keep it for yourself? Yes, there have been a couple. I knit a white shawl for my ex-mother-in-law at her request. And when she got it, she was kind of like, oh, because it wasn't a super fancy shawl, and I think she wanted something fancier. So I wasn't super happy about that, but I did end up knitting her another one like another year, and it was fancier, and she seemed to like that. And I'd knit her other things, so I don't know. Whatever. We let that one go. The only other thing I can really think of is back when I was a much newer knitter, I knit a tea cozy that was shaped like a cottage, like an Irish cottage with a thatched roof. It was so cute. I embroidered little satin ribbon flowers all over, you know. There's a picture of it in my project pages. You can find it. I loved that, and it turned out really, really well. And the people I gave it to, I don't think they really cared. I mean, they enjoyed tea, and that's why I made it, because I knew they had a teapot and a tea set and everything. But I think they were kind of like, okay, you know. I loved that thing. I wish I still had it. I keep meaning I should make myself one, because I just recently bought myself a teapot. So who knows, maybe I will. But yeah, I would think those are probably the two that come to mind. Most things, though, I enjoy giving to people, and I assume I don't tend to knit for people who aren't knit worthy. If I think somebody's not going to care, I probably won't knit it. K8R asks, what inspires your pattern designs? Is it a conscious effort, or do you just wing it? 9 times out of 10, I'm just winging it. I start to knit something and I either deviate completely from another pattern, or I just have an idea in my mind that I want to see if I can figure out how to make it happen. But I'm not someone who sits down and sketches things out and does a whole lot of planning ahead of time. It's usually a design as I go kind of thing. Jenny B82 asks, what have you decided to do with your wedding skirt? You spoke about making it into something else, but never brought it up again. Well, that's because I still haven't figured out what to do with it. It's funny, I just came across it the other day. I have it sitting in my office. Yeah, I do want to do something with it. I just still have not figured out what. So until I know for sure, I'm not going to cut into it and do anything. But it's still around. And along those same lines, Bluebird Nest asks, whatever happened to that hand-knit log cabin blanket? Well, nothing's happened to it. It's right here. I've got a whole bin of the squares. And in case you don't know what she's referring to, because this has been an ongoing project. I started this project, I want to say, in the fall of 2012. Basically, I'm just using my hand spun, and I am knitting up log cabin squares that I will someday put together into an afghan. I can't remember how many I have at this point. They're all different colors. It's such a fun project, and I still pull it out from time to time and work on it. I know I still need more squares to make it as large as I want it to be. So that's why I haven't started putting it together or anything. But yeah, it's sort of one of those projects that I have no deadline for. And when the spirit moves me, I work on it. It's a project that, like, if we're going on a road trip and I'm going to be sitting in the car a lot, I usually take a project bag full of yarn to make squares, because it's a really good car project. So I haven't had a car project opportunity in a while. So that's probably why it hasn't been worked on. But it's still around, and someday it'll get finished. Okay, now we're going to move on to more business Fibernymph Dye Works related questions. Iona Paint asks, I would love to hear about how you got started dyeing yarn and how you started Fibernymph Dye Works. Any hysterical stories about things gone wrong before you knew better? I'll answer that last part first. Honestly, I can say no. I can't think of anything too horrible that happened. Before I was actually officially starting the business part of my dyeing, I did experiment with dyeing fiber that I had purchased from a farm, you know, like at a fiber festival. It was farm wool, non-superwash, of course, and I felted the bejesus out of it. I had no idea what I was doing. It was terrible. But that was a good place to start, because then I learned some very important lessons from that. But anyway, how I started my dyeing business. Well, again, it was back in 2011. I had 2 teenagers that I was homeschooling, and at that point they were in high school, and I knew that their time in school was going to be coming to an end, and I was going to be having a lot more free time once they were done with their education. And so my reason for starting the business at that point in time was twofold. One, I wanted to have something in place that once they were done with school, I could amp up and make it more of a full-time effort at that point, and have something in place for me to do. But I also, at the same time, wanted something that they could help do, that they would be invested in, hopefully, and to earn some money. Because, you know, they could have gotten jobs at McDonald's or whatever, and that would have been fine. But I thought, what better way to learn about business and responsibility than to have a role in this yarn company. So that is what happened. I started my yarn business, and both Christopher and Emma helped me out for those first couple of years while they were still home, and I think that worked out really well. How I started, basically I started in my kitchen, you know, like a lot of indie dyers do. I'm not sure which details you want about how I started, but I did put together a plan. I maybe fly by the seat of my pants for a lot of things, but my business I've always been pretty planned and organized for. So I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to do self-striping. That was always, you know, my main objective. So like I had specifics in mind, and I just, you know, I did my research for getting supplies and what I needed to do and processes, and basically took it from there and have continued to learn as I've done, because that's the way I learn. I learn by doing, not by reading books a lot. I start by reading online or in books and learn the basics, and then I take it from there and refine everything to meet what I want to do. So hopefully those answer your questions. Wombat Knitter asks, I would love it if you compared your dyeing business now to what it was back then. The difference in the areas where you worked, the most important things you've learned along the way, funny anecdotes. Again, I can't really think of any majorly funny anecdotes. That's so weird, because I feel like I always have funny anecdotes about my life. But maybe it's good that my business hasn't had a lot of funny anecdotes. I don't know. Anyway, and I'm going to also answer the next question. TG Knits asks, why did you pick self-striping? I'm going to answer these two together. First of all, back when I started dyeing, one of the reasons, and this also sort of answers more about the last question too. When I started dyeing, I knew I wanted to do self-striping because I love knitting with self-striping and self-patterning yarns, but the only ones I ever had were commercial yarns like, you know, Opal and Regia and stuff like that. And there just were not a lot of indie dyers doing self-striping yarn back at that point in time. I mean, there were a few, but like Twisted Limon is one I can think of. That's actually the only one I can think of. I know there were more, but not very many, and it was hard to get. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to dye self-striping yarn. In comparison now, there's a lot more dyers doing self-striping yarn. It's not what most people gravitate towards right off the bat because it is very labor intensive. It's time consuming to do, but I just enjoy the process of it so much. As far as comparing my dyeing business itself to what it was like back then, obviously, you know, I continue to refine techniques. I find ways of doing things that might make things a little bit easier. It's funny, every once in a while I come up with something and I think, oh my gosh, this cuts my time for doing this particular process at least in half. I can't believe it's taken me like 5 years or 7 years or whatever to realize this. I'm still figuring out ways to make things easier without compromising the quality of it. So those have been changes that continue to happen, and those are always good. You know, my husband sometimes has input that makes me think, oh yeah, maybe I could do such and such, and you know, that's always good. Differences in the areas where I've worked. Basically, I moved from my kitchen to the basement here, so I won't say there's a huge difference other than the fact that at least here I don't have everything out in the middle of my living space, which is wonderful, which was also the main reason why I decided I really did not want to build a studio right out here where we were going to convert our front porch, because I would be able to see it all the time. I don't like seeing my business all the time. Just like most people who go to work at an office really would not want to have to see that every time they, you know, walked into the room, right? So having it downstairs here in our basement is perfect for me. And it's also nicer because I can't ruin like cabinets and things down there so, with dye. Most important things I've learned along the way, I would just say, the most important thing is I never stop learning. I'm always trying to learn, either by trying new things or doing more research or trying new dyes or new yarn bases or what have you. Finding, I would say the biggest thing, because there is so much more competition now, and competition isn't a bad thing. It makes you work harder to be better. But I would say coming up with new ways to market what I do, that has been definitely a big thing in the last few years. I've definitely had to find new ways to market my products and to keep things fresh and new and innovative. But that's not a bad thing. I enjoy that. That has really made a difference for me. So I feel like that was kind of a rambly answer, but hopefully it made sense. Okay, so I explained why I picked self-striping. TP Bomb asks, how hard is it to dye stripes? It's not super simple. There are a lot of different ways to do it. The way I do it is maybe, I honestly can't say if it's harder than others. I feel like sometimes it's harder than some other ways I've seen, but it works best for me. Basically, whenever you're dyeing self-striping, at least how I do it, you know, I have to wind the striping patterns from a ball of yarn into all these separate segments. Then I have to dye the yarn in those segments like that. Then it has to be reskeined from those segments back into a skein of yarn before I can sell it. So there's a lot of extra steps involved with self-striping that you don't have if you're dyeing yarn just in a skein, like when you're doing a semi-solid or a variegated. You know, that's just in the full skein, generally speaking. But there's other things that go into doing that yarn that you don't do with self-striping. So it all has its areas that make it a little bit more difficult, I guess. But self-striping is, without a doubt, I don't think you would meet anybody who does self-striping who would say, oh yeah, it's a breeze. I mean, it is labor intensive and time consuming. Those two go hand in hand, but I love it. It's what I love doing, and I've never thought that I should change that. Okay, a lot of people asked, what is my favorite and least colorway to dye, or one that I would never ever want to dye again? You know, I honestly can't say I have any one colorway that is my super least favorite to do. There are ones that I get tired of doing if I've done them a lot. Like back when I did the Nyan Cat colorway, which was an 8-stripe colorway, and I at one point had a waiting list of over 100 people waiting for Nyan Cat. I was a little tired of that colorway after a while, and I have not dyed it in quite a while. I won't say I'll never dye it again. I'm actually not too sure how much the desire is out there for it anymore, but yeah, that was one when I was finally done. I didn't do it very much after that. And then, you know, there were other colorways that people really had to have, like Fruit Loops. When I first came out with that, everybody wanted Fruit Loops. I did that for years. There have been colorways like that. I will say, backing up to that other question about, you know, things that have changed, I will say that people have a much shorter attention span for colorways these days. I I mean, there's always one or two that like people really want and will continue to want. But by and large, I've found that like you come out with some new colorways, and I used to be able to ride through a whole not ride, like, ooh, super easy, but like a collection of new colorways used to take me through a whole season and people would still be enthused about them. Now it's almost like people kind of expect new colorways every couple of weeks. Like, okay, what's new now? Like, I don't know. That's my interpretation of it. And it's not, again, it's not a bad thing. It just makes me work differently. Like, how can I do things differently? How can I be more innovative and still be a one-person business, essentially? So as far as, yeah, a least favorite colorway, I will say the other thing that will make colorways ones that I don't enjoy doing is if they involve dye colors that are prone to giving me issues. I have weeded certain dyes out of my collection over the years just because they're just too unpredictable and the results are just bad sometimes. Or, you know, there's nothing like ruining an entire batch of yarn because one dye color decides it's going to do something crazy. So I would say those are not favorite colorways, but for the most part, I enjoy doing most of my colorways. And if I don't enjoy a colorway, I quit dyeing it for a while. As far as a favorite colorway to dye, that's like picking your favorite child. I mean, there obviously are colorways that I like more than others just because of their colors. You know, I like certain colors more than others, just like, you know, anybody else. And I dye colorways that aren't necessarily up my colorway alley because, you know, I can't just sell things that I like. I have to sell for everybody. I would say Bahamian has always been one of my colorways that I've really, really liked. It's funny, it doesn't always sell well for me, but I love it with all those deep, like, you know, nautical blues and greens. I think it's a great colorway. I really enjoyed doing the anniversary colorway this year that I did, the 7th year stitch colorway. I really liked that one, although that was one of the ones that it gave me fits in a few different ways. So by the time I was done dyeing all of those, I was ready to be done for a while. But I still liked it. See, that's the thing. I can love and dislike the same colorway for different reasons. Layla F asks, what is your favorite holiday colorway? I would have to say the elves were in the eggnog. I've always enjoyed doing that one. It was my first like really offbeat Christmas colorway, and people still love it even now. So I would have to say that one's been a favorite for me to do. Pepper RN asks, and she had some other questions that I've already answered from other people, but she says naming colors can be hard. Naming colorways can be hard. What is your favorite name you came up with? I'm not sure that I have a favorite name that I've ever come up with. The ones that I tend to like the most, I guess, are ones that are sort of punny, like it's 1 o'clock somewhere. I mean, that was just sort of a fun name. I did a colorway one time, and I didn't dye it very much, and it wasn't a particularly popular colorway. I mainly dyed it when I was dyeing mulberry silk fiber, Floxy Lady, just because that was the color and it made me laugh. So colorways that I come up with that are like kind of cleverish names like that, those are the ones that I get the biggest kick out of. My daughter and I sometimes would stay up late, like before shows, and if I had dyed colors that were just one-offs, we would come up with some of the craziest names just off the top of our head. And I usually didn't use them, but well, sometimes I did. Yeah, but punny colorway names make me laugh and make me happy. Deb Mom of 3 asks, I love hearing how you come up with your colorway names and how they relate to your life, such as the Antigua series and the Mountain House seasonal colorways. Do you have plans for any more colorway series like those? I do. I've had one planned for quite a while now. Actually, ever since I've moved my studio up to here, I've wanted to do it. I just have not had a chance to completely plan it out because it's going to be a self-striping series. and I just need time to work on it a little bit more. I'm hoping in the new year. It has to do with where I live, but in a little bit more of a whimsical way than just being the mountain house. And that's all I'm going to say about that right now, because I don't want to put it out there and then people say, when are you going to have that? But I do. Those kind of series sometimes just sort of come to me on a whim. Like the Antigua series, that was, I hadn't planned that out, but we had that fabulous vacation, and it was so much fun putting those colorways together. And just like our vacation that we took last fall, I could probably come up with abundant colorways from that. But then I think, well, you know, maybe people aren't totally into having colorways themed after my vacations. So I try to be selective on what ones I do. The Mountain House series has definitely been my favorite to do so far, just because this area really does lend itself to some great colorways. Okay, let's see. Grable asks, is Squish 2.0 gone for good? Squish 2.0, for those of you who don't know, is one of my sock weight bases. It is a 75-25% Corriedale nylon blend, superwash Corriedale nylon. And no, it's not gone for good. I know I haven't had much of it in the shop recently. It's a little bit more labor intensive to use because it comes on cones only. I can't already get it in skeins like a lot of my yarn is. And because I'm not the one who's winding the balls most of the time, it's not one that's easy for me to give to somebody else and say, here, I need you to wind balls off this cone. So I have to be the one to find the time to wind the balls from the cones. And I'm doing most of the dyeing and rescanning and all the other stuff. So that usually is lower on the list. But I've got several cones of it downstairs in the studio area. I do plan to wind that off and use that for some dyeing, hopefully coming up soon. Honest, it's in the works, it's in the plans. It's just there's only 24 hours in the day, but it hasn't gone anywhere. I love that base. I think it's a great base. Mima Cox asks, any plans to ever vend at an event west of the Mississippi? Well, I really don't know. Right now I don't have any immediate plans. I did vend at the Stockinit Zombies retreat, the Knitpocalypse. What's it called? The Zombie Knitpocalypse. I did vend there one year. That's, I think, the only event I've ever vended at that's on the other side of the Mississippi. It is really travel time and the logistics of that that make it hard. I won't say I'll never do it, but I don't have any immediate plans. And when I'm researching shows, those usually are not the shows that I'm looking at, again, just because of the distance issue. Seductive Berry asks, what did you do in your past life before the yarn dyeing became your full-time business? And when did you realize you could turn it into your full-time job and take the leap? Well, I probably have mentioned this here and there throughout the years, but by education, I have a master's degree in community counseling services. I worked in that field exactly 1 year after getting my master's degree, and I hated it. I love the school. I love the educational part. My bachelor's degree is in psychology, and I love the theory of it, but I did not enjoy working with clients. That was not my thing. I think I'm too much of an introvert, and I'm also too much of an empath. And like knowing what some of these people were going through and dealing with, especially when it involved children, was really hard for me. And I just had a very hard time dealing with it. So that was one of many reasons that I decided to get out of it. Aside from that, though, since that time, I have done a number of jobs. A lot of them have been things that I've been self-employed with. I worked as a newspaper reporter, like kind of a freelance newspaper reporter for a few years in college. I worked, well, I guess that wasn't since then, but you know, during college I did that. I did work as a freelance writer for about 5 years when my kids were young. I loved doing that. I love writing. I worked as a sales rep for a direct sales jewelry company for about 5 years also when my kids were young, which I wasn't grand at, but it gave me a little bit of income. when I had young kids. What else have I done? I actually, right out of high school, I went to business school to be a medical assistant. And I did enjoy being a medical assistant. Specifically, I loved phlebotomy, which drawing blood. I was really good at it. And if I ever had to go back to work someday, I probably would do that. That's where I would go because I really enjoyed that job. And then I worked local yarn shop, you know, for about a year, and then she decided to retire and close. But I enjoyed that job too. Of course, there was yarn involved, so. And when did I realize I could turn my yarn dyeing business into a full-time job? Well, as I said a little bit earlier, that was always my plan, was to be able to take that job or that business that I was starting while my kids were still in school and be able to grow it once they were out of school. However, that plan did get a little fast forwarded, I guess. Number one, because my business took off way faster than I had anticipated it doing. So things did get busier faster, but then the year that my ex-husband and I separated, it kind of became a necessity that I go full-time because I needed a full-time income. And so that was what prompted me to launch into things more. And it was a pretty seamless change. From doing it part-time to full-time. At that point in time, I'm trying to remember now. My son was done with high school. He had just graduated high school. My daughter was still at home. She was in her last year of high school. She was really pretty self-sufficient at that point. She was doing dual enrollment and going to the community college, and the other stuff that she was doing at home required very little of me at that point because she was pretty well self-led. I was there mostly just to check in on things for her. So I was better, you know, I was at a point where I could, you know, make the yarn dyeing business more of my focus. So that's my story. All right, then we had some requests for tours. I had several people asked if I would do a tour of my dye studio / dye dungeon, or do videos of me dyeing. I would love to do like a really comprehensive video of that, but number one, again, I'm just in my basement. I know I see videos of people who have really lovely studio spaces, dedicated studio spaces that are just super pretty and artistic and creative. I don't have that. I have a dye space that consists of 2 tables, a stove, a chest freezer, which is where my microwave sits, laundry tubs where I do my water stuff, and my washer and dryer, which is where I sit all my yarn to cool until I rinse it. And then, you know, I have shelves where all my other yarn is, the base yarn and the wound yarn, but the shelves are interspersed with yarn stuff, and then, oh look, there's our tents for camping. Oh, and look, there's, you know, other things for, you know, our outdoorsy activities, and oh, there's a bin that has my husband's masonry work tools in it, you know. Like, there's a little bit of everything. Now, I will say that over Vlogmas, I have been recording down in my studio space more than I ever have. I don't know that I ever actually have, to tell you the truth. I will say Vlogmas Day 6, Day 7, and Day 11. I know those 3 have some footage of me doing different stuff. I don't know that I've recorded me specifically dyeing, but I know I did some rescanning and winding stuff. And I talk about different aspects of my dyeing setup on those 3 episodes. So I would look at Day 6, Day 7, and Day 11 of my Vlogmas videos and check those parts out that I did down in the studio for right now. Someday maybe I'll get something more official out, but for now that's what I can offer you. I also had a request for maybe like a tour of what my home looks like. And again, I would love to do that for you someday, but that's not going to happen until we get all the rest of my stuff from my move unpacked and put in its actual place, and have furniture that's not covered with tarps because it's just sort of weird looking, you know. Though, again, on that same note, I've been doing these Vlogmas videos and it shows a whole lot more of my house than I've ever showed in video form. So if you check those videos out, you'll probably see bits and pieces of my house that you haven't seen before. And lastly, as far as tours, Little Hip Kitty asked, would I do a tour of my yarn and fiber tools? I would love to do that. That would be such a fun thing to do sometime. I will keep that in mind, and that'll probably just be a separate video at some point. Then we had some general questions. Ms. Melody asks, I would love to know how your exercising is going. I watch while jogging on the treadmill, and knowing that I'm not alone, or I'm not the only one, is nice. Unfortunately, my exercise is not going well right now. Part of it has been just time, and other part of it has been my back issues, and I'm afraid of aggravating them. Although I know that if I was exercising more, that would be strengthening my core. Maybe I'd have fewer back issues. I did join a gym earlier this year, I think like late summer, over the summer at some point. I joined a local gym. I'm still paying for that. I haven't been going, but I went for about a month and a half. Then we went on vacation, and so I got totally thrown off. And then when we got back, I was so busy I didn't have time to go. And it's so funny because the last few weeks I'm like, oh, I really should go back to the gym. But it's weird because I always start thinking about it in December, and it's not a horrible time to try to do that kind of thing. And yet come January, I don't want to be anywhere near the gym until all of the New Year's resolution people have gotten over their resolution and stopped going and making the place super crowded. We do have our treadmill cleared off though, so I could start using the treadmill again, and I may. And I would like to start being able to do my yoga again, but it is my back that really kind of just makes me hesitate because I don't want to do something that's going to aggravate it. But it's still in my mind. I know I need to get back to it. Let's see. Sheila O'Keefe asks, I always enjoy the pet cameos. How many pets do you have now? I'd love to see a photo or video montage of all of them, along with their names and anything interesting, backstories, or music annex. Well, you've seen Babette hopping back and forth here behind me today. I tried to put together this little montage of these guys, but they were not very cooperative. But let me answer your questions. How many pets do we have? We have 6 cats, 1 dog, and a whole bunch of fish. I do have pictures of 5 of the 6 cats who were willing for me to actually take pictures of them when I was trying to do this. Tippy was nowhere to be seen, but you see Tippy all the time, so you know what she's like. And you know, my dog, Muffin, you see her from time to time too. And then the fish, we have a fish tank in our bathroom, which sounds weird, but it's actually a really cool place to have the fish tank. And I did take some footage of that. I will try to put that all together and maybe put that at the end of this video. But again, it's not going to be in any real organized fashion because not everybody was cooperating. As far as funny antics, you know what? These cats are like, there is no shortage of funny antics and craziness with them because they're just goofy, especially Tippy. Tippy and Babette, like, Babette can't tolerate Tippy, and so anytime Tippy's near her, she hisses, but Tippy has just learned how to push Babette's buttons, and like, she instigates. Tippy is totally an instigator. And sometimes we sit here and watch, and like Babette, we have like a half wall, and Babette will be sitting on the top of the half wall, and Tippy will be right at the bottom, and Babette will be staring down at her, and Tippy just waits until she looks away, and then she jumps up and like just goes, boop, got you, and then she sits back down, and Babette hisses at her, and it's like, they do it over and over. It's so funny. But as far as backstories, other than my dog, well, no, that's actually not true. My dog was a puppy mill rescue that I got. We think she was about 3 years old. So that's her backstory. She's a damaged dog. I feel bad. She never learned to play as a puppy. She was in a little cage for the first few years of her life. So that's her story. Babette was just a normal kitten. I got her from the place that I used to take Muffin to get groomed. They had kittens, and so that's where I got her from. As far as the rest of the cats, I don't really know all of their backstories, basically because they were Bill's cats before I got here, other than Tippy, who showed up a year ago when we were both here. They were all pretty much strays. That's how he got them. He will not turn a cat away. He will not turn any animal away. I mean, we could probably have like a hyena show up in the backyard that's hurt and he would take care of it. I hope we don't get any hyenas, but you know what I mean. Like, he's just that kind of person who loves animals so, so much that he will take in any animal that is in need. And I know he said, like, Winnie, our one cat, Winnie, she showed up. She was nothing but skin and bones, and he gave her a dish of food, and he said she has not stopped eating since. She's very rotund now. And same way, Polly, I mean, he was practically feral, I guess, whenever he showed up here, and Bill had to like feed him out on the porch and had a box set up for him because it was cold before he would ever come in the house. And now he's happy. He's our cat, though, that's got some sort of mystery illness, and he's on steroids again right now, but he's bouncing back again. But yeah, they're all, cats. Cats are just quirky. They all have their own personalities, and, they're just interesting. The fish are fun though, because like I said, the fish tank is in the bathroom, which is an odd place for it, but honestly, when you have this many cats, you kind of want it out of the way of where the cats are going to be, and the cats don't go in our bathroom. Tippy will sneak in the bathroom occasionally, and then she jumps up on this one seat we have in there, and she just stares at the fish tank. It's like cat TV for her. But my husband has cichlids, which are freshwater cichlids. There are a bunch of different ones. I don't really know a lot about them, but what's really cool is every once in a while we end up with babies. Right now there's 2 that are the newest. Now he just did a complete tank change in the last few weeks, which meant that he took everything out. Like, everybody gets out of the tank and gets in other aquariums, empties all the water, cleans absolutely everything out of it. He does that about once a year. Otherwise, he just does water. He changes out water. Like, he can take the water level down pretty low, and the fish are still in there, and then refills it and cleans what he needs to. But otherwise, yeah, so we had a couple of baby fish at that point. The one baby fish did not make it through that whole tank change, though, because they're, it doesn't take much to disrupt them and knock them off kilter. So we lost a few fish during that change. But yeah, one year we had like, I don't know, 10, 12 babies all at one time. That was crazy. We took them out and had them in their own tank for a while, but they're a lot of fun, and it's neat to you can just sit on the bench in the bathroom and like watch the fish, or sit on the toilet and watch the fish. I know, too much information, but anyway. Tara Aluna, I always say that wrong, I know, Ilona maybe, says, I'd like to see some videos from your bike tours. I'd love to see the scenery where you get to ride. I would love to show you videos from our bike tours, but I don't have any really. I have a lot of pictures from our vacation, but I was riding, so I couldn't really take video. I don't have a GoPro, so I can't really, take video while I'm on the bike. I will try to be better about putting more pictures like that up, though. We did see some lovely scenery. Even just around here when I ride, it's a lot of fun. I've tried to do that in the past, little snippets here and there, but I'll try to be better about that. Okay. Now we are at the end where I will do my 20 facts about me as requested. I have a really hard time coming up with things like this when somebody asks me to, so some of these might seem a little strange, but okay, we're gonna go for it anyway, right? Fact number 1, I am 5'4" tall. I only tell you this because I have had experiences where I've watched people on podcasts and then later met them and realized that they were either much taller or much shorter than they appeared to be when they were in their podcast. So I figured I'd let you know how tall I am. Fact number 2, I love memoirs. I listen to a lot of audiobooks while I'm working, and 9 out of 10 of them I would say are memoirs. And it can be in almost any area, like sports people, writers, musicians, political figures. It doesn't really matter. If it's a memoir, I will probably enjoy it. Fact number 3, I am a complete homebody. This is probably not a shock to you because I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but it bears repeating because it is such a strong part of who I am. I love being here at my house. I can go for days without getting in the car and leaving to go anywhere else, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Fact number 4, that said, I will start random conversations with strangers in the grocery store. I kind of do that very frequently, and that's usually a sign to me that maybe I do need to get out more. Fact number 5, I hate running. There's a lot of exercise that I'll do and I don't mind it, but running I have never been able to do and enjoy or be good at it. The only time I think I would probably be good at running is if something very large and hungry was chasing me. Fact number 6. Okay, first of all, let me preempt this just by saying is a lot of times people will ask you, well, if you could live anywhere, where would you live? And I would say I'd live here because I love where I live. However, if I had to live anywhere else in the world, I would probably choose Ireland. I love Ireland. Or Canada. Canada is very nice too. Ireland or Canada. Fact number 7. I hate cleaning the bathroom. I'm pretty much fine with almost any other household chore. Not like I love them, but you know what? I hate cleaning the bathroom. I would gladly pay somebody a lot of money to come in once a week and clean my bathrooms. Fact number 8. And again, you may already know this because if you've watched the podcast for a while, but I'll say it anyway. I learned to ride a motorcycle at the age of 49. One of the main reasons was because I did not want to live my life afraid as I was growing older. I wanted to be able to still have new experiences and push my boundaries and get out there and try new things. And riding a motorcycle definitely hit all those buttons. Fact number 9, I love guacamole. I could eat it every day. Every day. Fact number 10, gin and tonic is my favorite adult beverage. If you've been watching Vlogmas, that's probably not a surprise to you. However, I will add that just recently I bought my first bottle of Bombay Sapphire gin, and I think it may have ruined me for any other gin ever again because, man, that stuff is really good. Fact number 11. I once chased Madeleine L'Engle to the bathroom to get her autograph. I feel like I owe you the story behind this one. Many years ago, this was like when my kids were really little, Madeleine L'Engle, who is an author, or was an author, she's deceased now, one of my favorite authors, she came to Pittsburgh to do a reading, and my girlfriend and I wanted to go. So I got a babysitter for the morning so that I could go to this reading, and we went, and she was going to be doing autographs after her reading. Great. So we got in line afterwards. I'd brought a book with me, one of her books, for her to sign. We were in this long line, and right as we got up to the very front of the line, her person, her handler, whoever, said, I'm sorry, but Miss L'Engle needs to take a break now. She'll be signing autographs again after the lunch break. And I was like, but I've been in this line and I have to get home to my babysitter and my kids and I can't come back. And the girl was like, okay, follow us. So she got Ms. L'Engle up, and okay, I should also add, Madeleine L'Engle was in her 80s at this point, and she was also about a week prior to having a knee replacement or a hip replacement, some major joint replacement. So her handler, her person, got her up and started ushering her down this long hallway in the basement of this museum complex where we were to get to a restroom. All the while telling me, come on, follow us. And like poor Miss L'Engle, who has been reading and probably really, really has to pee, has this crazy person behind her coming to the bathroom with her. So we get to the bathroom and she was most gracious and she signed the book and everything. And I said, thank you. And I left. And it was only after that experience was over that I realized I just chased this world-renowned author who is elderly and needs her hip replaced and probably really had to pee. I chased her to her bathroom, the bathroom, just to get her autograph. That was probably one of the craziest things I've ever done. Fact number 12. I had a very important life lesson when I was in second grade. Here's another story for you. I adored my second grade teacher, Mrs. McCready's. She was sweet and nice, but she did not put up with any nonsense. And for whatever reason, I was sort of one of her favorites. And I stayed in touch with her all through my years of school. But anyway, in second grade, we were in class one time, and my elementary school had a creek that ran behind it. And for what she was talking about the creek, I don't know, there was some sort of activity going on where everybody was working individually and people were chattering. But the topic of this creek came up, and she said, does anybody know what the name of the creek is that runs behind the school? And I raised my hand because I knew. My dad had told me he grew up in that town, and I knew it was Turtle Creek. So I told her, it's Turtle Creek. And she says, oh no, I don't think that's what it's called. She said, Turtle Creek is actually several miles away. Well, she was referring to Turtle Creek, the town of Turtle Creek, whereas this creek was actually called Turtle Creek. So I didn't really say anything. I knew she was wrong, but she insisted that no, that wasn't Turtle Creek. Well, a little while later, she came up to me, and I was sitting at my little desk, right? And she crouched down so she could be eye level with me. And she said, you know what? I was just talking to people in the office, and you're right. It is Turtle Creek. I was wrong. And I will never forget that. That made such an impression on me that this adult who I thought so much of actually admitted she was wrong. And like, I guess it probably later in life is when I realized how much of an impact it made that she got down on my level and looked at my eyes, and it wasn't like she was like being in a position of power over me. She wanted me to know that she knew she was wrong. That just made such an impact on me. I've never forgotten that. Fact number 13. Some of the best concerts I've ever been to were ones that I really was not excited to go to at all to begin with. 3 that I can think of. 1, Donny Osmond. I went with my girlfriend because she has a major Osmond fetish, and she loves the Osmond brothers and Donny Osmond and has seen them many times. And because she agreed to go to the Rolling Stones with me, I had to go see Donny Osmond with her. I know, it's a weird trade-off, but whatever. So I went, and I was so surprised how good it was. I had totally expected him to just be like a caricature of himself, but he wasn't. He's a very good musician, and I really genuinely enjoyed that concert. Another one is Weird Al. Weird Al Yankovic, okay? My husband wanted to go see him a couple years ago, and I'm like, okay. He's phenomenal. Oh my gosh, he is an excellent musician. I've seen him one other time since, and we're going again next year. That was actually one of my Christmas presents I got from my husband, was tickets to his next concert here. Who knew? And lastly, and this may be more of a Pittsburgh thing than anywhere else, but Donnie Iris and the Cruisers. I was at like a summer concert festival one time, and he was one of the performers. He's been around in Pittsburgh forever, and maybe he is also known in other parts of the country and the world. I don't really know. I just know he's a real Pittsburgh icon. He's another one. I'm just like, oh, okay, Donnie Iris. And it's like, oh my gosh, this show was fantastic. I never would have expected it. So it's just so much fun to go to concerts there where you don't expect anything and end up thinking they're going to be great. Because I've also been to ones that I thought would be great, and then they're like, you know? Surprise. Fact number 14. Speaking of surprises, 2 of the best surprises I've ever had in my life were when one of my kids showed up totally unexpectedly and surprised me by being there. The first one was my oldest son. After he was back from his first deployment, I mean, he'd been back for a while, but he was still, down in North Carolina on base. And he showed up for a long weekend that he had gotten a pass for, and I didn't know that he was coming. He actually woke me up that morning. That was an incredible surprise. And the other time was my daughter, I think probably in her senior year of high school, or I'm sorry, her senior year of college. She came home for Columbus Day weekend. I didn't know she was coming. Her brother, she was in on it with her brother, and he let her in the house, and they woke me up in the middle of the night when she got there. Like, two of the best surprises ever. I can't imagine. Yeah, it was just great. Fact number 15. I once received a fine for being in a graveyard after dark. I was a teenager. Do you need any other explanation? Fact number 16. Monday is my favorite day of the week. I always feel like Mondays hold so much potential. I love Mondays. Fact number 17. If you and I are going to meet somewhere, there's a good chance I will probably be running 5 to 10 minutes late, or else I will show up ridiculously early. I have the hardest time being on time. I'm trying to get better about it, hence the ridiculously early. But yeah, I'm usually just like squeaking by, getting on time. Fact number 18. I love listening to classical piano music. I don't know why, because it never used to be a thing, but as I've gotten older, I really, really love listening to piano music. And a close second would be instrumental Celtic music. I love that too. Fact number 19. I really don't like ketchup a whole lot, but when I have French fries, I love dipping them either in mayonnaise or tartar sauce. I know that probably just grossed a whole bunch of you out, but it's true. Fact number 20, final one. When I'm bored or trying to stay awake, usually because I'm bored out of my mind, I amuse myself by playing the alphabet game by myself. I'll pick a category and then try to name something that starts with each letter of the alphabet that fits into that category. I've done it at concerts that I have not been enjoying. I've done it while in the car or riding my motorcycle, like when I took our trip this past fall and we had really boring stretches of highway. I played the alphabet game. It works. Okay, there you go. So, 20 facts about me. You asked for them, you got them. I don't know that any of them were super exciting, but they were kind of fun to put together because they're just weird things. All right, so last but not least, prizes. All right, I literally just drew the numbers. I used random number generator for 2 through 54 because we had 54 posts. I haven't even looked to see who they are, and I've officially written them on this napkin. So let's go. First prize, which will be the medium-sized project bag and the set of 6 20-gram mini skeins plus all those other extras, is post number 42. So let me get to the correct page and I'll tell you who post number 42 is. Post number 42 is Bluebird Nest. That is Irene. So congratulations, Irene. Please PM me with your full name and mailing address, and I will get your prize out to you. And thank you so much for both watching the podcast and for posting your question or your comment. Oh, she was the one who also asked the question about the log cabin blanket squares, and where are they? Alrighty, so that was first prize. Second prize winner is post number 14. And post number 14 was Tanya Twister. So Tanya, congratulations. You have won the Notions pouch and the set of micro skeins plus all of the extras. So please PM me with your mailing address and full name and I'll get that out to you. And thank you so, so much for your question, even though it was really impossible for me to answer it, and for watching the podcast all these times. All right, and then lastly is post number 47, which will be the $25 gift certificate to my shop. And that is Safe 54, and that is Cheryl. Cheryl, congratulations. Please PM me when you hear this so that I know that you know you won, and I will get you hooked up with your $25 gift certificate. And thank you so much for watching the podcast and for making your comments in your entry. All right, I think that is everything now. I have been recording pretty much all day. It's after 2 o'clock. I've had to pause several times to stop and recharge my phone. And so now I'm going to start the long process of editing and uploading both of these videos. Hopefully I can get them both up today, but no promises. I'll be putting part A up first, then I'll put part B up, because otherwise it would be confusing. Anyway, thank you again so much for everybody for watching the podcast, all these 300 episodes or however many you've been with me. I hope I continue to bring you some knitting fun and a nice diversion to your week, if nothing else. I will see you again before the end of December. And again, I'm doing the Vlogmas videos, so you can also catch me there. Otherwise, please have a lovely rest of your day. Have a lovely holiday, and I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.